Coming up, the man at the heart of a renewed mission to shake up the state of the Pentecostal Church, Pastor William Doe Kugbeadjor, the district pastor of the newly created Living Spring PIWC district, is my guest today on Nancy Meets.
In Tetteh Polytechnic, and then when I came to Europe, I sort of need to still further my studies. So this time a little bit of a change. Went into civil engineering, as a first degree, and then later on to do a construction project management master's program, which went very successfully by God's grace. Came up with a distinction.
Filmed at the pastor's official residence in South London, Pastor William speaks openly about the struggles of being a minister, his early beginnings, and why he is keen for something new and different to emerge from his youthful districts. Our conversation was wide-ranging, in-depth and revealing, and it's all coming up right now as Nancy Meets begins. Welcome from Shekinah Glory Tabernacle and to the final Nancy Meets of the series. I'm Nancy Mills, delighted to be with you once again. Now, most of us will know that leading anyone in any sort of endeavour is never an easy task. It requires a great degree of skill, wisdom and perhaps a little bit of patience. But in the end, those who are successful would argue that it is very much worth the while. Today's guest may be 1 year into his first ministry posting, but he's finding that these very attributes are placing him in a good stead to both lead and serve his congregation. As the inaugural pastor of the Living Spring PIWC district, one of the Church of Pentecost's new English districts, Pastor William Doe Kugbeadjor is really at the heart of a revival of the Pentecostal movement. His task? To help reinvent the church for a new generation of worshippers. But is he succeeding? 1 year since his appointment, I visited Pastor William at his official residence in South London to discuss that and find out more about the man of whom much depends. Just want to begin by saying thank you for giving us, the opportunity to sit down with you and talk about, how you've come to where you are now. So just want to begin by, obviously you are a minister of 4 churches. As you were growing up and, you were in the church, how did the calling come? And did you know from, an early stage that this would definitely happen to you?
Thank you very much. It's also a privilege and a joy to have you with us today and to interview me. Yes, growing up, I think I had the opportunity to grow up in the church, born to parents who were members of the Church of Pentecost. So right from infancy, we had the opportunity to start with a children's ministry. And I think from then, I think the elders and also the leaders of church would always say that someday, sometime, you'll become a pastor. And it's not something that we really considered because we had our own plans, or I had my own plans and what have you. So we went on pursuing education and what academic, just move on with it. But it was something that I knew someday, sometime, or would surely catch up with me. And I remember when I was traveling to the United Kingdom, somebody told me, you are going now, but you return as a pastor. And I knew it would happen because God also speaks, because ministry is said that it's not just about what people are saying, but there should be that conviction from yourself. And those two were there. And so I knew someday, sometime, it will catch up. But it's not something that I really paid attention to. But thankfully, that's how far God has brought us, and we give him praise.
Yeah. So when you say that, God obviously confirmed it for you, what happened in that moment? Do you think it was like an audible voice, or did it come through someone else telling you, or how did you know that, it was for definite, that God had said that this is what you were going to do? You mean
previously, when I was young? Yeah, as I said earlier on, in one's calling, others are involved. I remember the story of Apostle Paul, and when they were called to go into missions, the Bible says after they had prayed and they realized that the Spirit of God was telling them to send out this young man. And I believe that they had that conviction that indeed God was calling them. So you would have that conviction, and as minister or somebody who is being called, you must also have that conviction. The challenge is this: if others are calling you and you yourself, you're not convinced that you have been called.
Yeah.
So sometime when the challenges of ministry come, you end up blaming people that probably they forced you into it. But that conviction should be there, and you must hear the voice of God, and indeed God is calling you to this before you do it.
Okay. So you also grew up in the church, like you said, your parents were church Pentecost members. Do you think because of that it was inevitable that you would stay in the church, or you growing up, did you ever want to, you know, either leave, not necessarily leave the body as a whole, but maybe try another church, or were you ever drawn elsewhere at all?
It's not something that really came out or something I thought about when I was growing up. I think the Church of Pentecost itself is very unique in its way of doing things. Its emphasis on holiness and what have you. And growing up, I loved to compare what I hear the leaders say and preach to the Bible. And so I was really convinced that for me, there's a church that I would like to stay and also worship the Lord in. So it has never crossed my mind to leave the church.
The reason why I ask is obviously we have a lot of people that we have parents that are in the church, and we almost feel like it's compulsory that this is where we stay, but maybe we want to find out what it's like outside. So you went through church, you said like you started in Sunday school. I'm assuming that you progressed to youth ministry and stuff, and then obviously you were studying. What was education like back at home? Education,
I would say, wasn't bad at all. I attended an international school called Paul B. Grant International School, and then from there to the junior secondary school back then, and then to secondary school I went to a secondary technical school, so studied engineering. From there, pursued it to do a course or a national diploma in mechanical engineering, precisely production engineering, and Tetteh Polytechnic. And then when I came to Europe, I saw the need to still further my studies. So this time, a little bit of a change. Went into civil engineering as the first degree, and then later on to do a construction project management master's program, which went very successfully by God's grace. Came up with a distinction with that. And so education hasn't been bad at all. I wanted to pursue, but God had His own plan, and there comes a time you have to say full stop and focus on what God has called you to.
So, how did you feel when the calling came and you've done more than one degree, you've been studying for a long time, and you had to give it all up? Was that difficult for you, do you think?
Funny enough, it was not difficult when the calling came. I don't know, it wasn't difficult. Although at the same time, there were a lot going on. I remember whilst in Bible school, because I completed my master's program, I think a day before going to Bible school, funny enough. Whilst doing my master's degree, my supervisor wanted me to pursue the same topic that I chose for my dissertation, and that's for PhD. And they had a funded PhD for me. Whilst in Bible school, she would write and send emails regarding opportunities and what have you, wanted to work with me in the university that I attended. But one of the things I've seen is if you know you have been called, you know you have been called. And it doesn't matter what goes on, it doesn't matter what the world may present. If you know you are called by God or you have been called by Him, and you are convinced you are called by Him, I think nothing prevents you at all. And so it wasn't difficult at all, choosing between pursuing further studies and going into ministry. It was straightforward for me. It wasn't difficult at all. I think it has to do with the heart. You are convinced that He is calling you.
So if you, let's say it didn't happen for whatever reason at all, God didn't call you, where do you think you would be now, or what do you think you would be doing?
Personally, by now I would have been doing my PhD and the area of engineering. As I said, I think throughout my education, I think I've veered towards although I have other interests, but I think engineering interests me so much that so I would have been doing that.
And then outside of, what other interests do you have? So is there anything that out of growing up whilst you're young in Ghana, coming here, if it's not church, what else happens I know ministers don't really have spare time, because I've seen what your spare time looks like. You can have a call at any time or be called into a meeting, but when you come down to yourself, what does your spare time look like, if you have any at all?
I love to spend time with the family. As you rightly said, ministry can be quite challenging, and you don't belong to yourself.
Yeah.
And so you should understand that from the onset. But in my free time, I love to have quality time with the family to make sure that the children also have me.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy for you to be able to lose them. And so that area is an area that I'm very particular to make sure that at least each and every time I have some spare time,
for them.
at least the family is in the picture.
Yeah. And then what kind of things will you do to make sure that your relationship with them is as strong as it should be in that time?
In that time, on most occasions, I will take them to the park, and because I want them to be relaxed so that they can be able to talk to me. I think, and it has really helped. We go out. I just tell them. Sometimes they'll ask me, "Where are we going?" I said, "That's a surprise."
Yeah.
And I'll just take them out, play football with them, observe them, play together, and what have you. Sometimes they'll ask me to join in activities, and I will join. And I think it's been fun. It has helped to build a relationship with them because, as you rightly said, you're all over the place during the day or probably during the night. You can't tell where you'll be because when duty calls, you must go. So the little time you have, you want to make sure that at least they also have you.
Yeah. So how important is it to you? Because obviously there are some pastors that may not always think the same way. They'd rather have someone else take care of their children because they've got to go and be somewhere else. So maybe sometimes they might have house help or they would leave their children with a family member. But you have chosen to say, make sure that, you know, when you have the time, you do it yourself. Do you think it's important that you are the physical father to them rather than leaving them with other people?
Yeah, and ministry can be challenging, and I understand why some of these things happen. But I think there's nothing better than you being there for your children, in as much as in terms of time you might not have that long periods to be with them. I think the quality times with them goes a long way to help them as they grow up. They understand that you are there for them. Leaving them totally for a maid, I don't think does help. Even if you have a maid in the house because of the business of ministry, I believe you should have some time that you can spend with the children so that at least they can know you better. And because it does have implication on their future. When they grow up, that probably dad or mom wasn't around for us. We were looked after by probably our mates and whatever. And so we don't have that relationship with our parents. And I think this alone can affect them in their future life. So it's key and very important to us to make sure that at least we spend time with them. Yeah.
So it's been a year now since you've become our pastor. You know, bringing 4 very different churches together may seem as quite a difficult task. What kind of challenges have you faced so far?
I think the first year has been challenging but very enjoyable. One of the things I would say is that whenever God calls you, grants you every grace that is needed for you to be able to carry out the tasks that He has assigned to you. Anytime He calls, He will make grace available. I think sometimes people think that grace wouldn't be available, but His grace is always available, and He doesn't give you much more than He knows you can take. The first year, I think, has been quite challenging in the areas of settling in to a new environment. We've stayed in the West Midlands throughout our time in the United Kingdom, and so moving to London was quite new. But interestingly, we adjusted to the life in London very quickly. It's a very fast life, traffic wherever you go. But it's been an amazing journey. Apart from that, too, as you rightly said, our district brought together 4 unique churches from 3 existing districts, namely Deptford District, bringing Woolwich PIWC and Jubilee PIWC, Croydon PIWC, Croydon PIWC, coming out of Croydon District, and also Camberwell District bringing to us James McKeown, PIWC. You realize that those churches had 3 different ministers with different ways and unique ways of working, and so bringing those 4 churches together to become a family with many of the leaders and also members not knowing themselves can be quite challenging. Each comes with what they already know, and so to bring them together to think the same and to be united and to carry out a vision can sometimes be challenging. But interestingly, I think God has granted us grace in every area, and people have been very welcoming, and because of that, we have been able to achieve what we have been able to achieve within this 1 year. So we give God a praise for what He has done in His church through the people that we are called to lead, and also through ourselves.
Yeah. Have you had maybe, do you feel like there's been a bit of pressure? So these 4 assemblies have come in from other districts. Maybe they're used to doing a certain way, doing things a certain way because of the previous minister that they've had. And maybe they want to keep things that way, or they're just used to doing it that way. Have you had any instances where maybe it's been a bit difficult for you to implement things because, oh, you know, our old minister said that we should do it this way, or this is what we normally do?
I think it's been quite easy. I think leaders must have vision, and they should know where they're taking the people to. And most important, know how to communicate the vision to the people. When people understand the vision, I think it makes life very easy. When you're taking people along a journey and they don't know where you're taking them, it is very easy for them to resist. But it has been quite easy, and it's not been difficult at all, especially when God is in and a lot of prayer goes into it. It makes life quite easier than if you are not able to sell your vision to the people, and also allow them to input into the vision, because it should be a collective vision much more than your vision, because it is God's church and it must be understood. And God, in His own wisdom, also brings you into contact with people who have the mind of God. And so as you sell your vision, they also input, and you realize that it comes together where we can all own the vision. And I think that has made life quite easier for us over the period.
Do you think your team, maybe the district executives as a whole, since you've come in, how has carrying out the vision been? Do you think that they've come on board easily, or has it been maybe a challenge on a few people's parts because they're used to having things a certain way?
I think it's been quite easy. The reason being that I think the vision of the PIWC is to make sure that we are able to reach out, not only to Ghanaians, but also to reach out to the indigenous people, and to be culturally relevant to the context, or to the people that the place that we are worshiping in, and most especially in Europe. And so with the individuals having the same mindset, it makes it quite easy. And so we've not really had that opposition from anywhere, because they understand there's a PIWC, or Pentecost International Worship Center district, and the focus is to make sure that at least we are able to become a blessing to the people or the communities that we find ourselves in. So it's been quite easy.
Yeah. So it seems like, you know, the face of the church in the UK is changing. PIWC districts is something that has only happened very recently. You've only, I think, across the country, we only have a few. But obviously over the time, we want this to be, I'm assuming that the church want this to be something that's quite common. Why is it important to make sure that our church is open for all, being in the UK? Because I'm assuming that, you know, when the church started in the UK, it was because we had people of the diaspora here and they needed somewhere to worship. But now they're here, they've had children, the children have grown up here, they also need somewhere to worship. Do you think the concept behind being PIWC is important for the Church of Pentecost in the UK?
Yes, I think it's very key to our existence. In actual fact, if the PIWCs are not in existence, I think sometime, what happened to many churches would also happen to us. We can talk about the New Testament Church of God, which today you go there, you realize that the first generation is gone, and the second generation are nowhere to be found. And so this is very key if we want to continue to exist here in Europe, and to be a blessing to the nations. We are called to the nations, and to be able to do so, there's a need for us to contextualize the gospel in the context that we find ourselves in much more than, because it's very easy for us to overemphasize on the cultural identity of the church, and then we end up not understanding the dynamics of the recipients or the respondents' culture, and so we lose them. In the process, what you become is you become an alien in the community that you find yourself working in. And so the future will surely be the Pentecost International Worship Centers. That should be the future if we really want to impact those communities or the communities that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. I read an article that you actually wrote for a journal about, you know, the Africans coming into the UK with the, you know, the idea that, you know, they're bringing Christianity with them, the difference between Christianity here and African Christianity. You know that it's important to make sure that, you know, you're relatable to the people that are here already. Do you think the Church of Pentecost has succeeded in doing that so far, or do you feel like we have a lot of work to do?
I think we have come very far, but I think there's still a lot to do in that area. I think there's a need for us to build relationship in the communities that we find ourselves in. The world, in terms of the COP or the Church of Pentecost, worldwide, the vision is to make sure that we become a global Pentecostal church that is culturally relevant to the people, the communities that we find ourselves in the area of evangelism, in the area of discipleship, church planting, and also holistic ministry. To be able to do so, I think it takes a lot of relationship building in the communities that we find ourselves. As I said earlier on, if you don't do so, you become aliens, where people see you coming to church probably at a particular hour of the day. They see cars moving into a particular building. Can't tell what goes on there. After some few hours, people move out again. So you become aliens in the community. But I think it is key that to be able to achieve this vision, we build relationship in the communities. And it's key to church growth and bringing many to the saving knowledge of Christ.
So you studied, you know, both at home and here in the UK. Obviously, your field is within engineering. You've done various types of it. If, you know, for any reason at all, has your study of that field affected your ministry or your faith on a whole at all? And in which aspects has it done that for you?
I think most of the skills learned over the years in education is transferable. Talk about leadership skills, talk about communication skills, talk about managing people, what have you, and many others that we can talk about. You realize that those are transferable. So in as much as you may not talk engineering so much while standing in the pulpit, you realize that the skills very important in relating to people and also working and whatever. So it's been a blessing, and I don't regret at all studying to that level before coming into ministry. In a way, I think it has shaped my thinking, and it has helped me to be able to work effectively and efficiently with the people. Today I was speaking on foundation, and somehow I was able to bring in engineering to bear on the sermon, the issue of substructure, and which is what we normally call foundation or basement, and then superstructure, talking about the building that we see. And one of the things I was saying has to do with the fact that God is very particular. He sees foundation as very important, building on the rock, and relating it to the fact that Jesus must be the foundation on which we build our lives and what have you.
And still to come on Nancy Meets.
I think women play a very key role when it comes to ministry, and I think right from scriptures, the Old and New, you realize that they played great roles and important roles. Jesus' own ministry, you realize that women were at hand to support him throughout his ministry and were a blessing to the ministry. You talk about our church itself, its history, and you realize that women have played a very great role to bring the church where it is and continue to even play such roles.
Welcome back to Nancy Meets. I'm Nancy Mills. And let's get straight back with our conversation to Pastor William. Take a look at this. So you studied as well, and I understand that your wife has also studied as well, and you guys have been two people that have put those things aside and obviously been ministers in the church. Your wife obviously plays a very important role in your life as a minister, in your life as a man, as a Christian. Do you want to talk to us about how you met your wife and how you guys have come to where you are now?
I met my wife, I think years back. It's been 14 years. This year marks 14 years of our marriage, and it has been full of God's blessings, and I don't look back at all at any day, any time, any second of our marriage that I would say that I've regretted ever. She's been a blessing she's really been a blessing, and I think I'm able to do what I'm able to do because of her. Because when you go and come back, at least you have somebody who can be a source of encouragement to you, speak into your life and whatever you. So, and she understands me better. She sees me and she can tell me what I'm going through and whatever you, without speaking out. And so it goes a long way, and she has been very, very supportive. As I said, we met back in a higher institution back in Ghana. She was just a friend, but I think as the years go by and the time came for marriage, prayerfully I realized that she was the person. And it went from one thing to the other, and some days, 14 years ago, we got married, and by God's grace, I'm blessed with 3 wonderful kids who always keeps us working alongside ministry.
I think in our church especially, we're encouraged to have an open circle of friends and have a good network that maybe one day, like you said, things change and out of maybe your circle of friends. How was that moment for you? Like, how did you realize that out of your circle of friends that you've grown up with, this one is the one that's going to be my wife? How did it happen? How did
it happen? I grew up, the type was very careful when it came to relationship. And one of the things I still share with the youth of today is don't start it when you're not ready. Because we know that the dangers in that. People start a relationship into marriage sometimes about 10 years before they know for sure they will be married. And it leads to so many things. Sometimes as you progress in life, you end up meeting other people in life that you realize you relate better to. When you're young, the things that are beautiful to you doesn't become beautiful as you grow. You realize that things changes and whatever you. So I loved to have friends, build healthy relationship with them. And so it wasn't that difficult. I knew that sometime I will marry one of my friends. As to which one, I didn't really know. But I knew it wouldn't be somebody I don't know at all. Because somehow by having that friends around you, building a healthy relationship, you are able to see what is in each and every one of them. And they also somehow know you. And so when the time came, prayerfully, God, in his own wisdom, who is a matchmaker himself, that's God, brought us together. And it's been a beautiful journey.
I think the talk of like relationships and marriage and things in our church, what I've noticed over the years is that maybe the youth have found it difficult to relate to, because sometimes they feel that we haven't been given any practical things to do. Like you said, obviously you have a circle of friends and then you prayed about it and then you knew it was her. But sometimes we want something tangible. And it's not to say that prayer isn't enough, but what do you think are the practical steps that we can take as young people that understand that we have a purpose for our lives and a purpose that needs to be fulfilled? And by all means, whoever that we end up with will have a role in that purpose. So
when it comes to marriage?
I
think for young people, what I would advise is for you to commit to the things of God. When it comes to your walk with God, I think it's key to finding the right person. When we understand that marriage is God's idea, when we understand that he's a matchmaker and we understand that our lives are in his hands, I think that is where the confusion comes in. But when you understand that he has a purpose for your life and that whatever he has said concerning your life will come to pass and you commit to him, it's amazing how he does it. But he connects you to the right person. So for the young ones coming up, I think my advice to them will be to commit to the things of God, take their walk with God very serious in terms of their life, intimacy with God, in terms of prayer, the study of God's word. When it comes to church, at least, fellowship with others and whatever, you are like-minded, who have the mind of God. And as the years go by, you realize that things begin to happen naturally because God himself orders the steps of the righteous, and so he is able to do that, as he has done for us.
Has done for you, So do you think the process of choosing a partner as a Christian and the process of choosing a partner, knowing that you're going to be a pastor, is different? Because I guess maybe the grace that we require is a bit more. If you know that eventually down the line you're going to be in ministry, the person that's going to be by your side is going to take a lot on their shoulders. how important is it to choose someone that you know can bear that weight?
I think sometimes you cannot really tell what is going to happen in the years ahead. But I think what is key, as I said earlier on, has to do with one's walk with God.
Yeah.
And that matters so much because you don't know where you will eventually end. And it's very important that as you are connected with God, that individual too is connected with God. It's important that you don't just go for somebody. On most occasions, people like to go for somebody who is worldly with a mentality that they want to change the person's life. But if God has something for you or has a purpose for your life, and that individual also is a Christian, understands that God has a purpose for life, because God is a matchmaker, sometime you realize that it works together, and you realize you are perfect for each other, and there isn't any issue of, I think, the lack of waiting, the lack of, I think causes a whole lot of problem where people rush, go ahead of God, and it creates a whole lot of problem for them. Yeah.
Okay. And so what do you think your wife's role is in your ministry? How has she supported you? And, you know, what kind of things does she do that make you realize that, well, I don't think I would be the minister I am today without my wife?
I think the wife is helpmate, as the Bible says it. And so although she is not at the front when it comes to ministry, I think she's the person behind the scene and making sure that, I think, war strategies and what have you comes from the war room, isn't it? Where they meet and they are able to strategize and say, that's the way we want to go about things and what have you. And I think the wife plays a great role when it comes to that. So for the minister to be effective and efficient in his ministry, I think a lot depends on what happens at home. If there's no joy, there's no peace at home, automatically you cannot be able to do what you do. And so you realize the bulk of what you do has to do with the fact that there's somebody behind the scene always supporting you when it comes to your welfare, when it comes to your health, and what have you. Thankfully, she's a nurse by profession, which also helps and would be checking you. You have to eat, you have to do this, you have to, and it goes a long way to always around to support the kids too. And because of that, you are able to move around and do what you do, knowing very well that somebody who is around to support anytime you are down also. And she's my prayer partner. Study the word together and pray together and fast together and do so many things together, which helps, because I believe that the house should be a mini church. If it works in the house, then it can work outside. So in a way, I see my family so much as a mini church, a congregation before.
Yeah. Obviously, your wife plays a very big role in your ministry. She's also studied, and she's technically done a lot of the things that you have. Obviously, at the moment in the Church of Pentecost, we don't have any female ministers, but we see the youth is very vibrant at the moment. We're very exuberant in what we do. And because there's we outnumber the men in our church at the moment so much, we're taking on roles in leadership in regards to certain heads of ministries, either evangelism, music. We're in the forefront there. But then when it gets to a certain level, we have a glass ceiling in our church at the moment when it comes to women. Do you think that, obviously there are female ministers in other churches, but with COP we don't have any. Do you think that it's something that will possibly happen at all in the church? And do you think it will actually happen in your time, or will it be generations to come?
I think women play a very key role when it comes to ministry. And I think right from scriptures, the old and new, you realize that they've played great roles and important roles. Jesus' own ministry realized that women were at hand to support him throughout his ministry and were a blessing to the ministry. You talk about our church itself, its history, and you realize that women have played a very great role to bring the church where it is and continue to even play such roles. One of the things I probably will highlight has to do with the fact that not all men can also do what we do in terms of ministry itself, in terms of full-time ministry or become pastors, because it's much more of a calling than just something you want to do for yourself. So with regards to the area of women in ministry, I believe that the world is changing somehow, and various cultures, you go into various cultures and you see something different. As to whether this is going to happen in my lifetime, we just hope and pray, and as I believe that as our leaders are led, they would do as the Lord wants them to do. And most especially in a year where we have a theme, hearing and obeying the voice of God in our generation. Leaders are very particular about that. And I believe that when the time comes for women to be in full-time ministry, they will do so. But I think we have the women's ministry doing a great job. One of the vibrant ministries in our church, attending to women and woman to woman, because it's not everything that a man can be a blessing to a woman, especially you wouldn't understand some things about women. So the women's ministry and the leadership are there to be able to support women, to give woman to woman ministry or whatever you were, they're able to talk about a woman's world. And I think this is key and has been a blessing to our church. Yeah. So when the time comes, I believe that our leaders will surely do as they are taught by God.
Yeah. Do you think the leadership might ever have a fear that there are women in the church that believe that God has actually called them to do this, but because of the church they're in, they can't do it? So there's a case that they might leave, go to a church where they can pass the glass ceiling and, be in that role. If that is the case, we could possibly lose a lot of women in our time.
I think, there could be that, but I think we are fortunate as a church to be one that allows women to be able to operate and to do everything that the man does. I think probably the only difference has to do with the title of being a reverend minister that the women don't have. But when it comes to every aspect of ministry, preaching the word, prayer, prophecy, whatever you want, thank God, God doesn't look at one's sex in order to be able to, or status to give gifts to the individual. And by God's grace as a church, we allow women from all backgrounds and all cultures to operate, to preach, and to do everything. I think probably it has to do with a label as a minister. But I don't think that should prevent people or should cause people to leave the church. When you understand the grace upon your life, and because the church also allows you to be able to use your grace, the grace and the giftings that you have to be a blessing, I think it shouldn't be a problem. But I think that in the fullness of time, if leaders are led to do so, I believe they will do so. And so I encourage those who probably think they have that to still remain and be a blessing, because the church allows them to operate freely and become a blessing to the saints.
Yeah. So you were saying earlier, that family time and everything is very important to you. With a minister, obviously, in the future, it's possible that, you might move around from post to post with your children. What kind of strains have you experienced so far, being a minister, on your family, possibly your children and your wife? Have you experienced any difficulties in regards to the home life because of your role in the church?
I think ministry, as I said earlier on, can be quite challenging, and so the minister must learn how to balance all aspect of his life in order to be able to, because if there's no balance, then you realize that one aspect is suffering. And so as you do ministry, you must understand that your family is there. I think in ministry, God first, family second, church comes third. So you don't neglect your family at the expense of, because that alone disqualifies you from ministry, because you should be that type of person who, or a man who is responsible and understands that you need to be there for your family. So it is key. So the balance is where the minister must always watch out and make sure that there's that balance, so that one part doesn't suffer. Because if you veer towards one side so much, you end up losing your own family. And by the time you realize the children are out there doing what they are not supposed to do, which also puts a dent in your ministry. So it's very key. Yeah.
So obviously your children are quite young. They're still very early on in the stages. Maybe when it gets to a certain level, you'll need to explain to them that, yes, you are a pastor and they're your children, but they would need to obviously make decisions in regards to the faith themselves. How do you think that process will come about, and how will you encourage them to choose Jesus for themselves and not necessarily off the back of your ministry and rely on you going to church and praying for them? They will need to start praying for themselves. Sure.
It's something that we start from their infancy, knowing very well that what we have is pure gold and it's authentic, it's true. You want to leave for them something, inheritance that for sure cannot perish, something that can take them places, not only in this life, but even the life after. So it is key to the way we do things. Right from infancy, we study the Word of God together with them. We pray with them. At times they will ask us, when are we going to fast? And so they are involved in everything that we do. When we go for evangelism, they are always around and we'll be asking, when are we going again? And what have you? So that said, we're making sure the Bible asks us to train up the child the way they should go. When they grow up, they will not depart from it. So it is key to what we do at home. It is our part, and we understand that we are accountable to God when it comes to that. We are just stewards and managers of the children or the gifts that God has given unto us. So we do that until such an age where they will grow up to accept Jesus as their Lord and personal Savior, because we can believe for them. What we can do is to play our part in their upbringing and what we know is true. And when they grow up, we know for sure that it'll help them in their walk with God to choose right. Yeah.
Okay. So the church now, we did speak briefly about the vision earlier, but obviously Living Spring PIWC is a brand new district. I think we're all learning, we're all trying to do things to make sure that this district is a success. And if you could define exactly what your vision is for the district, how would you describe it to us?
Basically, when we look at the vision of the church worldwide, this Church of Pentecost, as I said earlier on, it is to be a global Pentecostal church, very relevant to its culture, the areas of evangelism, the areas of discipleship, church planting, and holistic ministry. And I think as a district of the Church of Pentecost, we also hold on to this particular vision to be relevant to the culture or the context that we are working in. And so Living Spring PIWC, 4 churches coming together to form a family. Our vision is to make sure that we become relevant to the culture in which we find ourselves. And to do so, I think what is needed is to make sure that we have people who are committed, or we are building up people who are bigger. And so the vision is to build bigger people, people who are rooted in the Word, people who are spirit-filled, people who are dedicated to the things of God, people who can be able to go into their communities wherever they find themselves to impact lives and to bring people to the saving knowledge of Christ. The beauty is that God is on mission on earth, and He has called us to partner with Him to bring the nations to His light. And so our vision is to just equip God's people, to help them to become matured so they can be able to impact the communities that we find ourselves in. And I think a lot will come through contextualizing the gospel. As I said, it's not about watering down on the gospel. The gospel still is what it is. It's unchangeable. It has power to save and to transform lives. And we are examples of what God can do when it comes to the gospel. But then it's about making sure that you understand the culture, or the culture that you are working in, that it's changing. And so you should also know how you can be able to contextualize the gospel so that it can become relevant to the people that you find yourself within. Yeah.
So within the first year, do you think personally that we've had a good start to the vision that you came in with?
I think we've had a very good start. It's been a challenging time, as I said, bringing together 4 churches from 3 different districts. So you are building the people who are united, people who have one mind. But as I said, it's been a very wonderful journey, because all hands are on deck, and all hands are people are committed to the vision. It's about selling the vision, people catching it, and people running with it. And I think that has really helped make the first year a success. We still have a long way to go because it's a process, and I know for sure that we will surely get there at the end.
Okay. So obviously, being in the Church of Pentecost, you have grown up in the church. There are a lot of things we do a certain way, a lot of practices that we do that maybe some of us as young people, I personally, not all of them, I necessarily understand why we do them. Are there any practices that maybe, or things in our doctrine that you don't necessarily think are either like you agree with, or you think they're necessary, but you obviously, because of your position, you have to make sure that they are done or you fulfill them? Have you ever encountered that sort of situation?
Not one that I've encountered, and one of the beauty of our church has to do with the fact that everything that we do is based on God's word. Look at our tenets, the tenets of the church itself. I'm talking about the Bible, one true God, goes on, and whatever, you realize that those are things that are from the scriptures. So it's not something that I've really come across, because whatever we do is something that is Bible-based or centered on Christ. What I was talking about earlier on has to do with the fact that we are able to contextualize what we have in every culture that we find ourselves, because it is very difficult for you to go find a plant that probably grows well in Africa and try to bring it as it is and plant it here, maybe in Europe, and expect it to be able to grow because of the climate. The weather condition is different back home. Tropical weather, come here, you have the summer, you have the winter, and whatever. So you realize that those challenges are involved. In the same way, when it comes to the gospel must be able to fit into every culture, critique it, transform it. Culture is not bad, and so we adapt to the culture, and then we are in the culture, understand it. We don't impose the identity of our church culture on the culture of the people. But then as we look at what they have, we are able to contextualize the gospel so we can be able to bless them or become a blessing to them. So that aspect is key. But when it comes to the gospel, we don't water down on it.
Okay. I think we have, to a certain extent, we've succeeded in the sense that the people like me that do feel comfortable coming to church, really because we've had the cultural background and also grown up here. So we've been able to bring that into the church and maybe teach the older people that, this is a way that you can relate to us, this is a way we can do things. Some of maybe the older people haven't allowed us to do it because it doesn't look like what they're used to. And maybe some changes have been made begrudgingly. Do you think that as a church, that's holding us back from growing at a pace where we should be? We should be at a certain place, I think, but we're not there because we've taken our culture to various countries, not just the UK, but various countries around the world. But we've taken our Ghanaian culture with us, and we've sat there and we said that, this is how we're going to do things. And I think it's taken us a step back. How do you think that COP will learn to keep up with everything that's going on around them?
I think COP will learn to keep up, and I think that has led to the introduction of the PIWCs and most especially the PIWC districts. Taking our case, Living Spring PIWC district itself, you realize that those were PIWCs that were in existing districts that are the mixture of Akan assemblies and PIWCs and whatever, Pentecost International Worship Centers. But I think the leaders saw the need to create Living Spring PIWC out of the existing districts by pulling out all the PIWCs, bringing them together. The vision is to make sure that we are able to reach out to the indigenous people who've neglected probably in a way as we become satisfied with our own culture and worship in our own way. We end up forgetting God's mission because his mission is to reach out to the nations and bring the nations to his light. And he wants to save all men. And I think if we continue to do things our way because we are satisfied with it, speak our own language, which is not bad because you flow in it better, but in doing so, we lose the people we are called to. And I think the PIWC concept is to make sure that we are able to. So in a way, I think we're getting there.
I think we've made a good start, especially at home here. I think we're well on our way. So for you as a person, what do you think your future holds, either as yourself as the man or you as the minister? What does the next couple of years look like for you?
I think the next couple of years look very bright. I see God doing great things, most especially in this church, the church that we are called to. So how long we're going to be here, only God knows. And we are ready because we know we've been called. But our hope and our prayer is that the Church of God grows. We want to see bigger people who are rooted in God's word. And I think we've introduced many things here when it comes to Bible studies and whatever every Sunday where people are able to study God's word, understand it, because the teaching aspect, I think, is key to what we do. If people don't understand what you're doing, it makes it difficult. And so the area where you talked about maybe the adult generation, the first generation of understanding the youth because they don't understand the culture, I think this will come through a whole lot of training and teachings for them to understand that for us to be relevant in this culture, I think there will be a need for us to change the way we do church. If you bring or import everything right from Ghana straight to do church here, you find it difficult to be able to make inroads and bring the indigenous people. But I think the future is the PIWC.
Yeah.
If we really want a church that will stand the test of time and we want to continue to exist, then I think the PIWC is what must be key in spearheading that.
Okay. And many thanks to Pastor William Doe Kugbeadjor for sitting down with me. And if you want to find out more information about the Living Spring PIWC districts or the Church of Pentecost on a whole, why not visit their websites on the screen right now? And that's it from me. Many thanks for staying with us over the course of the series. From all of us on the Nancy Meets team, thank you for watching and we'll see you soon.